You ever notice how somewhere along the line, parenting stopped being a natural human activity and turned into a full-blown professional career? Not a job. Jobs end at 5. I'm talking a career with performance reviews, competitive benchmarks, and the constant fear that your kid is going to fall behind the imaginary children of people you don't even like. Parents don't just raise kids anymore. They manage them like high-value corporate assets whose stock price could plummet if they miss one violin lesson or screw up a spelling test. Every child is now a project plan with milestones, metrics, deliverables, and a 13-point development strategy before they even know how to tie their shoes. And the parents doing this, they act like they're CEOs of a startup called Kid Inc. And the product better be flawless, because failure would reflect right back on them. You see these parents with clipboards in their eyes. They talk to their kids the way supervisors talk to employees who are one mistake away from being put on a performance improvement plan. Everything is measured. How many new words the kid learned today? How many minutes of productive play? How many steps they're taking toward early literacy milestones? The poor kid can't even sit on the floor and poke a Cheerio without someone evaluating the motor skill implications. And the wild thing is, these parents think this is normal. They think this is good. They think loving a child means turning the kid's life into a cross between a TED Talk and a quarterly progress report. And you know where this comes from. It comes from fear, not love fear. Fear that their kid will end up average. God forbid a child is average in today's world. Average is a crime against the modern parenting code. If your kid isn't exceptional, unique, brilliant, charming, outstanding, and ready for a scholarship by age 6, the neighbors will think you're negligent. So these parents strap themselves into this parenting treadmill that never turns off. Every moment has to be optimized. Every activity must have a purpose. And every purpose must serve a bigger purpose. Everything is a stepping stone to something else that supposedly matters more. Nobody lets a kid just do something because it's fun anymore. Fun is suspicious. Fun must be justified. What skill are they developing? How does this prepare them for future success? Does it enhance cognitive agility? The kid is 5. The only cognitive agility they need is figuring out that crayons taste bad. This obsession with excellence is everywhere. Parents walking around like talent scouts at a youth convention, scanning kids like they're evaluating draft prospects. Has got good hand-eye coordination. We should put him in baseball. She's got a strong imagination. We need to get her into creative writing workshops. Hay likes stacking blocks. Maybe he's a future engineer. They can't even let a child stack a few blocks without plotting out a career path. Maybe the kid just likes stacking things. Maybe the kid would also enjoy knocking them over. But no, knocking things over is not on the approved list of constructive activities. Destroying your own creation. Not in this house. You build, you grow, you progress. Always forward, never backward. That's the motto. And don't even get me started on the schedules. Kids today have busier calendars than surgeons. Soccer on Monday, music on Tuesday, tutoring on Wednesday, robotics on Thursday, and Mandarin immersion on Friday. The only immersion the kid wants is diving into bed and sleeping for 12 hours. But no, rest is inefficient. Rest doesn't look good on the parent's resume. They're out here curating a portfolio of their child's experiences, polishing it up like they're preparing for an investor pitch. Our son is well, rounded. Well, congratulations. He's also exhausted. Then you've got the food. Eating has turned into an event. Food is no longer fuel. It's a philosophical stance. You see these parents carefully selecting artisanal snacks, organic gluten-free, range ethically, source crackers made by monks in the Alps. They give the kid these $5 crackers and look proud, like they're saving the planet one bite at a time. Meanwhile, the kid is staring longingly at a bag of regular potato chips like it's forbidden fruit. But no, those aren't in alignment with the dietary roadmap. You don't want to derail their nutritional growth trajectory. Imagine telling a child they're going to derail their trajectory with a potato chip. It's a chip, not a life decision. Everywhere you look, parents are auditioning for the role of world's most involved caregiver. They're showing up to school meetings like they're attending high-level negotiations. They're writing emails to teachers that sound like legal briefs. They're posting pictures online of their kids doing enriching activities, not because the kid enjoyed it, but because the parent needs to demonstrate they're hitting their professional parenting KPIs. Kids used to run around freely, screaming, playing, laughing, doing stupid things. Now they're props in a curated presentation about how enlightened and engaged their parents are. The irony is, all this effort doesn't make kids any better. It just makes everyone more stressed. The parents feel pressured to produce a perfect child, and the child feels pressured to perform perfection back at them. It turns the home into a little performance theater. Everyone's acting. Nobody's living. And at some point, you look around and realize you've created a world where childhood is no longer a time to explore. It's a time to execute, to meet expectations, to excel, to compete. Parents aren't raising children, they're engineering outcomes. And the kids learn exactly the wrong lesson. That their value comes from how well they play the part. The truth is, all this so-called excellence is just insecurity with a bow on it. These parents don't trust life. They don't trust themselves. And worst of all, they don't trust their kids. They think the only way anything good can happen is if they intervene, supervise, arrange, guide, instruct, evaluate, correct, and then write a 5-paragraph reflection on the learning opportunities provided. Kids don't need that. Kids need room, space, a little chaos, time to be idiots, time to fail, time to learn without an audience. But that's the problem with professional parents. They can't let go. They're too busy managing, shaping, curating, too invested in the idea that raising a kid is a competitive sport. And when you turn parenting into a competitive sport, you stop seeing the kid for who they are. You only see what you want them to become, and that's the moment the whole thing falls apart. Because a child isn't a project. A child isn't a resume. A child is a person, and a person can't live under a spotlight forever. That spotlight burns. You look around today, and it feels like childhood has been turned into some kind of sterile laboratory experiment. Everything's been padded, polished, disinfected, bubble wrapped, child-proofed, and sanitized to the point where a kid can't even stub a toe without triggering a full-scale parental emergency response unit. Parents hovering like air traffic controllers, guiding their little flightless birds through life with all the precision of people who think gravity is a negotiable concept. They don't let the kid climb a tree unless they've done a risk assessment. They don't let the kid run unless they're wearing enough safety gear to survive re-entry from the International Space Station. And they definitely don't let the kid fail at anything, because failure would mean the parents themselves might have to admit that life comes with sharp corners, no matter how many soft edges you glue onto it. Kids used to go outside and disappear for hours. Nobody knew where they were, and nobody cared, as long as they limped home by dinner mostly intact. You got dirty, you got bruised, you got yelled at by a neighbor, you got stuck in a tree, you fell out of a tree, and somehow you learned a few things about life in the process. Today, a kid steps outside, and there are 6 adults monitoring the situation like it's a military operation. Stay within my line of sight. Be careful. Don't go too far. Too far. The kid's 10 feet away, not trekking through the Andes. And even if they were trekking through the Andes, they'd probably learn something more useful than what they pick up under constant surveillance, like how to handle the unexpected without someone narrating every possible danger. It's like parents are allergic to their own children, experiencing anything that hasn't been pre-screened, pre-approved, and pre-selected for maximum emotional safety. Dirt is treated like radioactive waste. Don't touch that. Wash your hands. Sanitize. These kids don't need more sanitizer. They need a little bacteria. They need mud. They need to build an immune system, not a psychological dependency on lavender, scented disinfectant wipes. Childhood used to be a glorious mess. Now it's a sterile showroom of curated experiences. Nobody's allowed to scrape a knee anymore because a scraped knee might cause long-term emotional turbulence. The only turbulence these kids experience is the panic in their parents' voices every time life gets even slightly unpredictable. And all this protection doesn't make kids stronger. It makes them fragile. When everything dangerous, difficult, or uncertain gets removed for them, they don't develop resilience. They develop anxiety. They panic at anything that isn't perfectly controlled because they've been trained to expect the world to operate like a padded playroom. But the world is not padded. The world has rough edges. The world has failure and discomfort. And that weird feeling you get when you try something new and it doesn't go your way. And if kids never experience that early on, they grow up thinking every challenge is a catastrophe. Every setback is a crisis. Every unfamiliar situation is a threat. A little adversity goes a long way. But these parents want to eliminate adversity like it's a disease instead of the thing that actually builds competence. And you know what happens when you protect kids from everything? They never learn how to trust themselves. They only trust the voice that's always hovering beside them, telling them what to do, how to do it, and when to stop doing it because something could go wrong. Mistakes are treated like moral failures. Falling down is treated like a psychological wound. And heaven forbid a kid feels frustrated, confused, or challenged. Parents rush in with solutions before the kid even knows what the problem was. They don't let kids wrestle with discomfort. They don't let them be bored. They don't let them figure out how to solve something on their own. They smother the very experiences that shape independent people and then wonder why the kid freaks out the minute they face a situation without supervision. Boredom used to be the birthplace of imagination. When you had nothing to do, you invented something. You created worlds, you built forts, you made up games, you discovered what your brain could do when nobody was entertaining you. Today, if a kid says, "I'm bored," parents react like it's a medical emergency. Quick, get them an activity, get them a screen, get them a structured play experience. Anything to avoid the horrifying, dangerous possibility that a child might be left alone with their own imagination for more than 6 seconds. And then they wonder why these kids grow up needing constant stimulation, constant distraction, constant noise just to feel normal. When you deny them boredom, you deny them creativity. And what about risk? Kids need risk. Real risk. Managed by their own instincts, not their parents' neuroses. Risk teaches limits. Risk teaches judgment. Risk teaches you that you're not indestructible, but you're not helpless either. But risk has become a 4-letter word. Parents treat the world like it's full of lurking dangers around every corner, waiting to pounce the moment they loosen their grip. They think the playground is a battlefield. They think the sidewalk is a danger zone. They think a tree branch is an assassination attempt waiting to happen. You can't live like that. More importantly, a kid can't grow like that. The truth is, these parents are not protecting their kids from danger. They're protecting themselves from discomfort. They don't want to see their child hurt, so they pretend the world can be modified to remove all pain. They don't want to see their child struggle, so they step in the moment anything gets difficult. They don't want to acknowledge that life is messy, unpredictable, unfair, and sometimes painful, so they wrap their children in the fantasy that none of that applies to them. But it does. It always does. And the longer you delay a kid's encounter with real life, the harder that encounter hits. Because one day, no matter how clean, calm, and controlled their early environment was, those kids are going to face something they can't sanitize, avoid, or negotiate. They're going to face a problem that can't be bubble wrapped away. And when that day comes, they'll have only two choices: face it unprepared or fall apart completely. And the saddest part is, they never had to be that unprepared. They just needed a little dirt, a little danger, and a little freedom. A chance to fall down on their own terms. A chance to get up. You ever notice how somewhere along the way, raising kids turned into a kind of competitive performance art? Not just the parenting itself, but the idea of producing these gleaming, polished, perfectly behaved little ambassadors of parental excellence. Every parent today wants their kid to be the walking, talking proof that they've mastered the sacred craft of modern child rearing. It's not enough for the kid to be healthy or happy or vaguely functional. They have to be extraordinary, outstanding, impressive to strangers. You see it in the way parents talk, the way they hover, the way they panic when their kid shows even a hint of being human instead of some flawless prototype assembled from the best parts of every self-help book ever written. But here's the joke: kids aren't perfect. They're not supposed to be perfect. They're weird, unpredictable little creatures who spill juice on expensive carpets and ask inappropriate questions in public. They get things wrong. They misbehave. They're curious, confused, impulsive, beautiful messes. That's childhood. But parents today treat childhood like a delicate sculpture. They're afraid to chip, scratch, or expose to anything that might make it less than museum worthy. They micromanage everything, not because it's good for the kid, but because they want the world to think they're doing everything right. They want validation. They want applause. They want to feel like they're winning at parenting, as if parenting is some kind of contest judged by people who don't even know you exist. You see these parents who live in constant fear of their child doing something that doesn't fit the script. A tantrum in public. Disaster. A bad grade. Shame, a choice that isn't photogenic enough to post online, won't happen because the parent steps in before the kid even gets the chance to make the wrong decision. They're curating a brand, not raising a person. Every moment is carefully orchestrated to maintain the illusion of the perfect child living the perfect life under the guidance of the perfect parent. And the kid feels that. They learn quickly that their job is not to be themselves, but to be whatever version of themselves gets the most approval from mom, dad, teachers, and the entire imaginary audience watching their lives from behind the glowing rectangle of a smartphone. And when you build your identity around pleasing an audience, you stop knowing who you really are. That's what's happening to these kids. They grow up thinking every action has a score. Every choice has a performance value. And every mistake is a failure of their character rather than a normal part of being alive. They start thinking of themselves not as people, but as performers in their parents' ongoing show. They become experts at meeting expectations and amateurs at knowing their own needs. They look confident on the outside, but fragile on the inside because their entire sense of worth depends on whether they're living up to an image they didn't even choose. It's not just the parents either. Society has jumped in like a panel of judges ready to score every child's life like it's a talent competition. Schools demand excellence. Activities demand commitment. Social media demands perfection. Every environment a kid walks into is another stage with another set of expectations. The kid can't even hand in an art project without someone analyzing its deeper potential. Maybe the kid was just doodling. Maybe they were just having fun. But fun has become suspicious. Fun is too random. Fun doesn't carry the weight of future achievement. So even fun gets turned into a stepping stone for something else. You see parents pushing their kids into 100 different activities, not because the kid shows interest, but because the parent wants to make sure the child is well-rounded. Well-rounded is parent code for my kid does more things than yours, so praise me. But all this rounding out just ends up hollowing the kid out. They become busy, but not fulfilled. Accomplished, but not confident. Impressive, but not authentic. No time to discover what they actually enjoy because they're too busy checking items off a list that somebody else wrote for them. And then there's the discipline. Modern parents don't even discipline their kids for the kids' sake. They discipline them for optics. They correct behavior because they're afraid other adults will judge them if they don't. A kid acting out in public isn't seen as a kid being a kid. It's seen as the parent failing at their job. And instead of acknowledging that children occasionally malfunction, these parents jump into crisis mode. Whisper, yelling, bribing, negotiating, lecturing, anything to restore the image of control. Not real control, mind you. just the appearance of control. The kid doesn't learn discipline. They learn performance. They learn to hide their truth, to avoid embarrassment. They learn that being honest about their emotions is dangerous because it could make the parent look bad. As these kids grow up, they become adults who don't know what they're allowed to feel. Adults who panic when they're not perfect. Adults who crumble under pressure because they've been taught their whole lives that mistakes equal failure. And not just failure in general, failure to live up to someone else's idea of the ideal human being. They grow into people who can't say no, who can't relax, who can't enjoy their own lives without wondering if they're doing it right, or if someone is judging them for doing it wrong. They're built to impress, not to exist. And you'd think the parents would step back at some point, realize the madness of it all, and let their kids breathe. But no, the pressure keeps rising. Because once you start chasing perfection, you can't stop. You can't admit your kid is normal after spending years insisting they're exceptional. You can't admit you were wrong. You can't admit your child is simply a human being and not some shining trophy meant to reflect your own importance back at the world. The pursuit becomes the prison. The perfection becomes the problem. What's tragic is that kids don't need any of this. They don't need perfection. They don't need pressure. They don't need to be symbols of anything. What they need is room to explore who they are without an audience evaluating the results. They need parents who aren't terrified of imperfection. They need space to make mistakes and discover what makes them unique, not special. Special is a comparative term. Unique is personal. Kids aren't meant to outshine one another. They're meant to find their own light. But you can't find your own light when someone else is always adjusting the spotlight for you. And that spotlight only blinds you.